Hey guys, Mr. McKinney here, just going through a Math Excel problem that I keep getting asked about. So there's a problem that looks somewhat like this, where you have rational exponents and you're asked to find the first derivative and the second derivative. So let's go ahead and work through this one. And we're trying to find the slope, or dy dx. So we're taking the derivative with respect to x. And again, we're going to find the first derivative, and then we're going to find the second derivative. The first derivative isn't too bad. It's the second derivative where it gets a little bit more tricky. So derivative of x to the 5/6 would be 5/6 x. Subtract 1 would give me negative 1/6. And then the derivative of x with respect to x, I don't have to write this, but if you want to, you can. That's just 1, so multiplying by 1 doesn't change anything. Over here, 5/6 y to the negative 1/6. This time, I do need to make sure I either write dy dx or y prime. The derivative of y with respect to x is not 1. dy dx is not 1, so I need to make sure this goes in there. Derivative of a constant is 0. Now, I'm trying to solve for dy dx, so I'm going to move this term over to the left side. So 5/6 y to the negative 1/6. dy dx equals negative 5/6 x to the negative 1/6. To get dy dx by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by 5/6 y to the negative 1/6. So 5/6 y to the negative 1/6. 5/6 can cancel out. So dy dx equals, I'm still going to have a negative. I don't like negative exponents, so I'm going to switch them. A negative exponent on the top can go on the bottom, a negative exponent on the bottom can go on the top, and then you won't have negative exponents anymore. You'll have positive exponents, which I think are much easier to work with. So here is your first derivative, and most people are able to get that. There's a lot of different ways to write it. You might have written it as negative y over x to the 1/6, or negative x over y to the negative 1/6. These are all fine. I think this is the easiest way to work with when we start doing the second derivative. So let's look at the second derivative. And you're going to start with the first derivative. And then since the first derivative is a fraction, in order to get from the first derivative to the second derivative, I'm going to have to use the quotient rule over here. So the second derivative with respect to x of y, and that's why the notation is written like this, because the d dx is the way to say the derivative, so this is the second derivative of y with respect to x. All right, whenever I do the quotient rule, whatever's on the bottom, I'm going to keep that on the bottom and then just square it. So x to the 1/6 squared. On the top, I would start with whatever was on the bottom, so x to the 1/6 times the derivative of the top. So move the 1/6 in front, I would have negative 1/6 y to the negative 5/6 if I take away 1. And then I need to make sure that I multiply by the derivative of y, dy dx. Minus, and then we're going to do the top, so negative y to the 1/6, times the derivative of the bottom. And the derivative of the bottom is going to be, running out of space, 1/6 x to the negative 5/6. Now, the nice thing about Math Excel is that you don't have to simplify things. The one thing you do need to make sure you do is plug the first derivative into the second derivative part of the equation. So I do need to make sure that I take this equation for dy dx and plug it in for dy dx here. But beyond that, you do not need to simplify. So I'm going to show you the way that I would type it into Math Excel. Because on the AP exam, on a free response question, you don't have to simplify it. So on the top, I'd have x to the 1/6 times negative 1/6 times y to the negative 5/6 times negative y to the 1/6 over x to the 1/6 minus negative y to the 1/6 times, ran out of space again, 1/6 x to the negative 5/6. And then that whole thing, you can either leave it like this, or x to the 2/6, or x to the 1/3. Any of those is fine. And again, this is a really ugly problem. Don't simplify it. You don't have to. Type this into Math Excel, and it will tell you if you've done it correctly or not. The most common mistake is that kids are putting parentheses in the wrong place. So for example, one error I saw was instead of writing it like this, they would say negative 1/6 y to the negative 5/6 power. The problem is the negative 1/6 is not going to the power of negative 5/6, so that would be wrong. Only the y is going to the power of negative 5/6. So hopefully this helps. Show up to tutorials if it doesn't, or shoot me an email. Thanks. Have a great day.